I gave warmth to two alien sisters. Years later, the palace called me back. Lyle had never thought he would find himself on the edge of the galaxy, working on a space station that floated above a desolate, war-torn planet. His job was simple, helping anyone in need. A trained medic, he had seen all kinds of injuries, from minor scrapes to life-threatening wounds, but nothing could prepare him for the two beings that would change his life. It all began one quiet evening. The station's automated systems pinged, alerting him to a small escape pod crash landing near the station. His heart skipped a beat. Escape pods were often used by fleeing passengers in distress, and the thought of finding survivors filled him with urgency. He hurried to the docking bay, not knowing what or who he would find. When the pod's hatch opened, Lyle's breath caught in his throat. Two alien sisters emerged, their skin a pale lavender hue, their features sharp yet graceful. They wore clothing designed for space travel, but it was torn, singed from the harsh conditions of the escape. Both looked exhausted, eyes glazed with the fatigue of having endured something unimaginable. The older sister, Ilara, appeared to be the more composed one. Her dark blue hair, tied in a loose braid, contrasted sharply against the pale skin of her face, though it was smeared with dirt and ash. She stumbled forward, supported by the younger sister, Selene, whose platinum blonde hair glinted faintly even in the dim light of the station. Lyle's instincts kicked in. He quickly approached, scanning them for any visible injuries. They both looked hurt, but more from exhaustion and shock than anything else. His medical training had prepared him for this. He helped them to a nearby bed in the medical bay, his hands steady as he checked their vitals. The sisters barely spoke, exhausted from the chaos they had endured. But Lyle could see the worry in their eyes, the fear of being lost in the vastness of space, with no one to help them. For days, Lyle cared for them. He provided food, medical treatment, and shelter, knowing that their wounds were far deeper than what he could see. As the sisters recovered, they began to open up, slowly telling Lyle their story. They were from a royal family, part of an ancient line that ruled over a distant planet known as Elira. Their ship had been attacked by a powerful faction seeking to seize control of their homeworld. In the midst of the attack, they had been forced to flee, leaving everything behind. Elira, the older sister, explained that their father, the king of Elira, had sent them away to protect them. They were the last surviving members of the royal family, and their return to Elira was vital. But they had no way of getting back, stranded on this unknown planet with no ship, no allies, and no plan. Lyle listened quietly, his heart heavy with the weight of their situation. He could see that both sisters had a regal presence, though it was hidden beneath the layers of exhaustion and fear. They were not just any alien women. They were royalty, and yet they were vulnerable, far from their home and their people. As the days passed, Lyle helped them regain their strength. He taught them about the ways of the station, showing them how to navigate the technology they were unfamiliar with. They, in turn, taught him about Elira, its culture, its people, and its history. Lyle learned that the Eliran people were known for their wisdom and advanced technology, yet their society was on the brink of collapse due to the war that had torn their kingdom apart. The bond between Lyle and the sisters grew stronger each day. Elira, once reserved, began to open up to him, her quiet strength becoming more apparent. Selene, the younger sister, was more playful, always curious about the things around her, but Lyle could see the sorrow that hid behind her bright blue eyes. One evening, as they sat around a small table in the medical bay, Lyle made a simple suggestion that would change everything. He told them that he would help them get back to Elira. They needed a way to escape the planet and make it back to their homeworld, and he was determined to find a way. It would not be easy, but Lyle had always believed in helping others, no matter the cost. Elira hesitated for a moment, her gaze searching Lyle's face. "Why would you help us?" she asked softly. "We are strangers to you. You have no reason to risk your life for ours." Lyle smiled gently, his eyes filled with sincerity. "Sometimes the reason to help isn't about what we gain, it's about what we can give. You two don't deserve to be trapped here, and I'm not going to let you stay in hiding. I'll help you find a way back home." The sisters exchanged a look, a silent conversation passing between them. Then Elira nodded, a small but grateful smile appearing on her face. "Thank you, Lyle," she said, her voice filled with quiet appreciation. "We don't know what the future holds, but we are grateful to you for this." In the following days, Lyle began searching for a way to get them off the planet. He scoured the station's databases, looking for any ships that might be capable of making the long journey to Elira. But the more he searched, the more difficult it seemed. The war had created chaos throughout the galaxy, and most ships were either too damaged or unavailable. He realized that getting the sisters back to Elira would require more than just luck. It would take ingenuity and courage. Lyle was not deterred. He spent hours working on repairs to the station's systems, using his knowledge of technology to find any possible leads. Along the way, the sisters continued to teach him about Elira's history, the politics of their people, and the challenges they would face when they returned. They spoke of their parents, Elira's love for her mother and her fear of what might have happened to her father. Despite the looming danger, Lyle found peace in the companionship of the two sisters. They were no longer just refugees, they had become his friends. And though he still knew very little about their royal heritage, he felt a deep sense of duty to help them, as if their fates had become intertwined with his own. Then, one day, Lyle received a message, an encrypted transmission from a ship in the nearby sector. It was a long shot, but it was the best lead he had. The ship could take them off the planet, and with any luck it could get them to Elira. He gathered the sisters, excitement and fear both bubbling in his chest. This was their chance. It was time to make their move. But just as they were about to leave, Lyle couldn't shake the feeling that the danger they faced was far from over. There were forces out there, ruthless, determined forces, that would stop at nothing to capture the sisters and bring them back to their enemies. He couldn't protect them forever, but he would try. As Lyle prepared to embark on this new mission, he realized something. He was no longer just a medic or a stranger to these two sisters. He had become a part of their story. And no matter what the future held, he knew he couldn't walk away. Lyle felt a sense of urgency as he stared at the blinking light on the station's control panel. The encrypted transmission he had received was a message from a freighter captain who claimed to have a route to Elira, but the journey would be long and dangerous. The ship was small, only capable of carrying a few passengers, and the captain was known to take risks in order to make a profit. It wasn't the ideal solution, but it was their only chance. The sisters were not as eager as Lyle to board the freighter. Elira, the older sister, seemed more concerned about the risks they were about to face. She had always been the more cautious one, the one who planned and thought through every move before acting. But even she could see that this was the best chance they had to return home. Selene, the younger sister, was more hopeful, her eyes shining with a spark of excitement. She had always been more optimistic than Elira, and the idea of returning to Elira gave her a sense of purpose. For her, it was a chance to reclaim the future that had been taken from them. Lyle could see the different emotions in their faces. He understood their fear and uncertainty, but he also saw their determination to return home. They had been through so much already, and the thought of giving up now was unthinkable. As the days passed, the sisters began to prepare for the journey. They packed only the essentials, medical supplies, a few personal items, and a small amount of food. The station was far from luxurious, and they didn't know how long they would be gone, so they kept their belongings to a minimum. Lyle helped them as best as he could, making sure they were ready for whatever might come next. Elira, still concerned about the risks, couldn't help but ask Lyle about the freighter captain. "Do you trust him?" she asked, her voice steady but full of doubt. Lyle paused for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I don't know him well," he said, "but this is the only option we have. We can't stay here much longer. We'll be safe on the ship, and the captain is the only one who can get us to Elira." Elira looked at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. She didn't want to put her sister's life in the hands of a stranger, but she knew that time was running out. "I hope you're right," she said quietly. The day arrived for their departure. The freighter was docked in the lower bay of the station, a small, rusted vessel that seemed ill-equipped for a long journey across the galaxy. But the captain, a grizzled man named Joran, greeted them with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. His ship might have looked worn, but it was all they had. "Ready for the ride of your life?" Joran asked with a rough chuckle. His voice was deep and gravelly, and his hands were calloused from years of working on ships. Lyle nodded, though a part of him was still uncertain. The sisters climbed aboard the freighter, and the small crew began to prepare for takeoff. The ship's interior was cramped, with only a few rooms and a small cockpit. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. As the freighter lifted off the station, Lyle looked out the window at the planet below. It was a desolate world, scarred by war and conflict, and he knew that leaving it behind would be a bittersweet moment for the sisters. Elira was their home, but it was also a place full of memories of loss and pain. He couldn't imagine what they must be feeling. The journey ahead was long. The freighter was slow, and the course they had to take would take them far from the main trade routes. They would be flying through uncharted territory, where space was dangerous and unpredictable. Lyle had traveled a lot in his life, but nothing could have prepared him for the isolation of this journey. For the first few days, the sisters kept mostly to themselves. Elira spent most of her time in the small medical bay, tending to her sister's health and reading through data pads that contained information about Elira's political situation. The war had torn their people apart, and there was no guarantee that their return would be met with the welcome they hoped for. She had always been the pragmatic one, and she knew that returning to Elira meant facing a world that might not accept them. Selene, on the other hand, was eager to talk. She sat beside Lyle whenever she could, her curiosity about the universe never ceasing. She wanted to know everything about life outside of Elira, about the stars, about the people they would meet, about the planets they would visit. Lyle answered her questions as best as he could, though there were many things he didn't know. He was just a medic, after all, not a star traveler. As the days passed, the sisters began to relax a little. They started to spend more time together, talking about their past and their hopes for the future. They shared stories of their childhood, of the days before the war had come to their planet. It was clear that the bond between the two sisters was strong. They had been through so much together, and their love for each other was unwavering. Lyle watched them from across the room, his heart heavy with the weight of his own feelings. He had grown attached to them not just as patients, but as people. The kindness he had shown them had led to something deeper, something he hadn't expected. He cared for them more than he had ever expected to care for anyone, and the thought of what lay ahead filled him with dread. One evening, as the ship sailed through the void of space, Lyle found himself standing on the deck, looking out at the stars. The silence of the universe was overwhelming, and he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He knew it was just his imagination, but he couldn't help but feel that the danger wasn't over yet. The sisters joined him shortly after, both of them quiet as they stood beside him. Elira spoke first, her voice soft but filled with determination. "Do you think we'll be safe once we reach Elira?" she asked. Lyle turned to face her, trying to offer her the reassurance he knew she needed. "I think the hardest part will be getting there. Once you're home, you'll have the support you need. Elira is your birthright. You deserve to be there." Selene smiled up at him, her eyes bright. "Thank you, Lyle, for everything." Lyle smiled back, though the weight in his chest didn't ease. "You don't have to thank me, I'm just doing what I can." But deep down, Lyle knew that his role in their lives had changed. It wasn't just about protecting them anymore. It was about being there for them, no matter what. The bond they shared was now unbreakable. As the freighter continued its journey through the stars, Lyle couldn't help but wonder what awaited them on Elira. Would they be welcomed as the royal heirs they were? Or would their return be met with suspicion and danger? The galaxy was full of uncertainty, and Lyle was about to discover just how far his loyalty to the sisters would be tested. The journey ahead would not be easy, but one thing was certain. Lyle would stay by their side no matter what. And together they would face whatever came next. The journey through space felt endless. Each day blurred into the next, as the freighter moved further away from the station and deeper into uncharted space. Lyle spent his time helping with repairs, checking on the sisters, and ensuring the ship's systems remained functional. It wasn't the most glamorous life, but it was necessary. They were on their way to Elira, and the thought of what awaited them kept Lyle's determination strong. Elira and Selene, though, seemed to have mixed feelings about the journey. While Selene remained hopeful, always eager to talk about Elira and the life they might reclaim, Elira had grown quieter as the days passed. She often retreated into herself, lost in thoughts that Lyle could only guess at. He knew that the closer they got to Elira, the more the weight of their past would affect them. One evening, as the stars outside the ship's windows shimmered like distant dreams, Elira approached Lyle. She had been standing by the controls, staring out into the dark expanse of space for a while. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, almost hesitant. "Lyle," she began, her tone more serious than usual, "what do you think will happen when we get to Elira?" Lyle turned to her, surprised by the question. He had assumed that, after all the talk of returning home, Elara would be more certain. But now he saw the doubt in her eyes, the fear she had kept hidden beneath her calm exterior. He knew that this journey wasn't just about escaping their enemies. It was about facing the unknown, about reclaiming their birthright and deciding what kind of future they wanted to build. "I think," Lyle said slowly, choosing his words carefully, "that you'll get the chance to take back what's yours. But I also think it won't be easy. The palace is full of politics and you'll have to fight for your place." Elara nodded, looking out at the stars again. "I've always known that it wouldn't be easy, but there's more at stake than just the throne. It's our people, Lyle. If we fail, they might never have a chance at peace. The war has torn Elara apart, and I don't know if we can fix it." Lyle watched her, understanding the weight of her words. She wasn't just worried about herself or Selene. She was carrying the responsibility of an entire planet on her shoulders. It was a heavy burden for anyone to bear, but for someone as young as Elara, it felt even more daunting. "You're not alone in this, Elara," Lyle said, his voice firm. "Whatever happens, you'll have Selene, you'll have me. You don't have to do this by yourself." Elara looked at him, her eyes softening. "Thank you, Lyle. I know I can always count on you. But I worry about what's to come. We don't even know if the people will accept us. And even if they do, how can we stop the war? The palace is a battleground, and the factions there won't just let us walk in and take control. We're going to need more than just strength. We're going to need allies." Lyle understood her fear. Elara was a vast and divided world, and its royal court was full of intrigue, betrayal, and ambition. He had heard enough from the sisters about the political struggles their family faced to know that it wouldn't be an easy road. But he also believed in them, both of them. Elara's strength, Selene's kindness, and their shared determination to rebuild their home. Together, they were capable of more than they knew. "The first step is getting there," Lyle said. "Once we land, you'll have the chance to prove yourselves. You don't need to have all the answers now. You just need to take it one step at a time." Elara gave him a small smile, though the worry still lingered in her eyes. "One step at a time," she repeated softly. "You're right, I can't think too far ahead." As the days passed, Lyle found himself growing more and more attached to the sisters. They had become his family, and he would do anything to ensure their safety and their success. The journey was hard, but the thought of Elara, of the palace, of their people, kept them all moving forward. There were days when the freighter's small, cramped quarters felt like a prison, but the stars outside reminded them that there was a future waiting for them. Then one day, as the freighter moved into a sector of space closer to Elara, Lyle's attention was drawn to a warning light flashing on the console. The ship systems were alerting them to an approaching vessel, another ship in the area. It wasn't unusual to encounter ships in deep space, but this one seemed to be moving at a high speed, and it wasn't responding to any of the ship's hails. Joran, the freighter captain, frowned as he checked the ship's scanners. "It's a pirate vessel," he said, his voice tense. "We're too close to Elara's space lanes. They must have been watching us." Lyle felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Pirates weren't uncommon in these parts of the galaxy, but the thought of being attacked now, so close to their destination, made him anxious. He glanced at Elara and Selene, both of whom looked alarmed at the news. "Can we outrun them?" Lyle asked. Joran shook his head. "Not without risking damage to the ship. We'll have to face them." Lyle knew the sisters were frightened, but they couldn't let their fear control them. They had made it this far, and they couldn't stop now. He turned to Elara, who had already begun preparing herself for the worst. "Stay calm," he said to her. "We'll handle this." "We've faced worse." Elara nodded, but her expression was filled with determination. "We'll fight. It's the only option we have." The ship jolted as the pirate vessel fired a warning shot. The lights flickered briefly, and the sound of the ship's alarms echoed through the corridors. Lyle quickly made his way to the cockpit, where Joran was already maneuvering the freighter to evade the incoming attacks. "We need to outsmart them," Joran muttered under his breath. "They may have the firepower, but we've got speed and maneuverability." Lyle helped with the ship's systems, coordinating with Joran to avoid the pirates' shots. The freighter may not have been built for battle, but it was fast, and they used that to their advantage. As the pirate ship continued to chase them, the sisters remained in the background, ready for whatever came next. Hours passed, and the pirate ship showed no sign of giving up. It wasn't just a simple robbery. They were trying to capture the ship, take everything it had, and leave no survivors. Lyle could feel the pressure mounting, but he refused to let the fear of failure creep in. The sisters needed him, and he would not fail them. Eventually, Joran pulled a risky maneuver, leading the pirate ship into a nearby asteroid field. The sharp turns and close calls forced the pirate vessel to slow down, its weapons unable to target the freighter through the dense rocks. Lyle could see the relief in the sisters' faces as they made it through the danger. "We're safe for now," he said, though the feeling of victory was short-lived. They had escaped, but they knew that their journey was far from over. The closer they got to Elira, the more enemies they would face. The pirate attack had been a reminder of just how dangerous space could be. As the freighter continued on its path, Lyle found himself more resolved than ever. No matter what happened, they were going to make it. They were going to return to Elira, and whatever awaited them, they would face it together. As the freighter made its way closer to Elira, the tension inside the ship grew heavier with each passing day. Lyle had grown used to the low hum of the ship's engines and the faint sounds of the crew moving about. But now, with the danger of pirates behind them, there was a new weight to the air, a feeling that they were on the brink of something life-changing. The sisters, though, seemed to carry their own worries with them. Elira had always been quiet, but lately her silence had deepened. She spent most of her time alone, staring out at the endless stars through the ship's portholes. Lyle knew she was reflecting on the future, thinking about the royal palace, the people of Elira, and the challenges they would face when they arrived. It was one thing to return to the place you had been born. It was another to reclaim what you had lost. Selene, on the other hand, had become more anxious, her excitement tempered by the reality of what lay ahead. She had grown up with stories of Elira, the lush forests, the grand palaces, the proud heritage of their people. But she was also aware of the war, of the fractured kingdom they would be returning to. The joy of going home was mixed with the fear of how it might all turn out. Lyle understood both of their feelings. He had become so deeply involved in their journey that it felt like his own future was intertwined with theirs. They had become his responsibility, not just as a medic, but as a friend. And the thought of what awaited them on Elira filled him with a strange mix of hope and dread. One evening, as the stars twinkled brightly outside the ship, Lyle walked into the common room, where Elira was sitting alone. She was staring at a data pad, her fingers lightly brushing over the screen, but her mind clearly wasn't on it. She looked up when he entered, her face tired but calm. "You've been quiet lately," Lyle said, taking a seat across from her. Elira didn't answer immediately. Instead, she closed the data pad and set it aside. "I'm just thinking," she said softly. "It's hard to imagine what it will be like when we land. So much has changed. My people. I don't know how they'll react." Lyle nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "It won't be easy, but you're not alone in this. You have Selene and you have me." Elira's gaze softened as she looked at him. "Thank you, Lyle. I don't know what we would have done without you." He smiled, though there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. "You would have made it. You're stronger than you realize." As they talked, the ship's communication system crackled to life, interrupting their quiet moment. It was Joran, the freighter captain, calling from the cockpit. "Lyle," Joran's voice came through, "I need you up here. We've got a problem." Lyle stood immediately, a sense of unease settling in his stomach. "What's happening?" "It's a distress signal," Joran explained. "There's a ship ahead of us and it looks like it's in trouble, but something doesn't feel right. It could be a trap." Lyle didn't hesitate. He grabbed his medical kit and made his way to the cockpit. As he entered, he saw Joran hunched over the control panel, his brow furrowed in concentration. The distress signal was coming from a small vessel that appeared to be stranded in space, its systems barely functioning. "It's too risky," Joran said, glancing at Lyle. "If we get too close, we could become an easy target, but we can't just ignore it. They might need help." Lyle's mind raced. The pirates had taught him how dangerous space could be. But he couldn't ignore the possibility that someone was in real trouble. He looked at Joran and made up his mind. "We go," Lyle said firmly. "But we need to be careful. Get as close as you can, but keep our weapons ready in case this is a trap." Joran hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "All right, we're going in." The freighter slowly adjusted its course, heading toward the distressed ship. Lyle could see it now, an old, battered vessel, its hull scorched and its systems flickering. The distress signal was weak, but it was enough to indicate that there were survivors aboard. Lyle's heart clenched at the thought of someone stranded, helpless in the cold vastness of space. As the freighter closed in, Lyle's thoughts shifted to the sisters. Alara and Selene had been through so much already, and he couldn't bear the idea of anything happening to them now. He knew the danger they faced, but he also knew that they couldn't just turn their backs on someone in need. The freighter came to a halt just outside the range of the distressed ship. Lyle could see the outline of the vessel clearly now, and his instincts told him that it was indeed a trap. The damage to the ship looked deliberate, as though it had been designed to lure in unsuspecting ships like theirs. But there was no way to be sure until they investigated. Joran turned to Lyle. "What do you think?" Lyle thought for a moment. "We'll board the ship, but we go in armed and ready. We can't afford to make any mistakes." With that, the crew prepared for the boarding. Lyle, along with Joran and a few of the crew members, gathered their gear and made their way to the airlock. The sisters stayed behind in the freighter, their eyes filled with concern. "Stay here," Lyle told them, his voice gentle but firm. "I'll be back soon, just stay safe." Selene nodded, but Alara's face was filled with worry. "Be careful, Lyle," she said. "We don't know what's waiting for you." "I will," he promised, trying to offer a reassuring smile. The airlock doors opened, and Lyle, Joran, and the others stepped onto the boarding vessel, heading toward the distressed ship. The silence in space was deafening, broken only by the sounds of their footsteps as they crossed the short distance between the two ships. As they approached the hatch of the other ship, Lyle could feel the tension rising. They were ready for anything, but the unknown always carried a certain weight. The door to the damaged ship creaked open, and they stepped inside. The interior was dark, the emergency lights flickering weakly. The faint smell of burnt wiring lingered in the air. Lyle's heart beat faster as they moved deeper into the ship, their footsteps echoing in the empty hallways. As they moved through the ship, Lyle's thoughts kept returning to the sisters. He had promised to protect them, and no matter what happened on this ship, he wouldn't fail them. His role had grown beyond just that of a medic. He was their protector, their ally, and in some ways, their family. Suddenly, a voice rang out from the shadows. "Who's there?" Lyle's heart skipped a beat. It was a woman's voice, weak and trembling. Lyle stepped forward cautiously, his hand resting on his blaster. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he knew they had to be careful. "We're here to help," Lyle called out. "We got your distress signal." "Are you all right?" the voice answered, but this time it was quieter, full of fear. "Help, please, they're coming." Lyle's pulse quickened. Who was she, and who was she running from? Before he could respond, the ship's emergency lights suddenly blinked out, plunging them into darkness. The sound of footsteps echoed from the other end of the hallway, heavy, determined footsteps. Someone was coming, and they weren't here to help. The sound of footsteps grew louder as Lyle, and the crew stood frozen in the dimly lit hallway. Their breaths came faster now, the realization settling in that they were not alone in this derelict ship. Lyle tightened his grip on his blaster, his senses sharpened as he listened intently to the echoes of movement around them. Whoever, or whatever, was coming, they were close. "Stay alert," he whispered to Joran, who stood beside him, his hand also on his weapon. "We don't know what we're dealing with." Joran nodded, his face grim. "Let's move quickly. We're not here for a fight, but if it comes to that, we need to be ready." The hallway was narrow, the walls cracked and scorched from what seemed to be a violent attack. Lyle could see signs of struggle, furniture overturned, broken equipment scattered across the floor. This wasn't just a ship in distress. It was a ship that had been abandoned after something terrible had happened. They continued down the corridor, carefully checking every corner as they advanced. The faint smell of smoke lingered in the air, and the silence between their steps felt unnatural. Lyle's mind raced, wondering what kind of situation they were walking into. Was this a trap set for them, or were there survivors who still needed help? Then they rounded a corner, and Lyle stopped dead in his tracks. Ahead, a figure stood in the shadows, a woman, her form barely visible in the low light. She was thin, her clothes torn, her face pale and drawn. She was holding something in her hands, but Lyle couldn't make out what it was. The woman's eyes, wide with fear, locked onto Lyle's as he stepped forward. You came," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You're not with them?" Lyle shook his head, his heart pounding. "No, we're here to help. We received your distress signal. Are you all right?" The woman didn't respond immediately. Instead, she took a step back, as though wary of their approach. "They're coming," she muttered again, her voice trembling. "You have to leave. They'll kill you. They'll kill all of you." Lyle exchanged a quick glance with Joran. The fear in the woman's eyes was unmistakable, and the urgency in her voice sent a chill down his spine. "Who are you running from?" Lyle asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The woman hesitated, her eyes darting nervously to the shadows behind her. The soldiers, they were sent to kill me. I'm the last one left. Lyle's heart sank. He had heard of the brutal tactics used by various factions throughout the galaxy, but hearing it firsthand from someone so terrified made it all the more real. "We'll help you," he said, his voice firm. "But you need to come with us. We can't stay here." The woman's gaze flickered between Lyle and the darkened hallway, as though considering her options. She finally nodded, a look of desperation on her face. "Please, you have to get me out of here." Just as Lyle moved to help her, a loud crash echoed from behind them, followed by shouting voices. Lyle spun around, his instincts kicking in. The soldiers were here. They had arrived. "We need to move, now," Joran shouted, grabbing the woman's arm and pulling her toward the boarding vessel. The group ran, their footsteps pounding against the metal floors as they made their way back toward the freighter. Lyle glanced over his shoulder, seeing shadows moving in the distance, shapes with weapons closing in fast. There was no time to waste. "Keep going," Lyle urged, his voice rising with urgency. He could hear the soldiers gaining on them, their footsteps quick and relentless. It was clear they weren't going to let anyone escape without a fight. They reached the airlock and rushed inside, the woman still clutching Lyle's arm, her face full of terror. As soon as the doors closed behind them, Joran wasted no time. He hit the controls to start the freighter's engines, and the ship shuddered as it powered up. "Go, get us out of here," Lyle shouted, his heart racing. The freighter's engines roared to life, and the ship began to move, slowly at first, then faster as it gained speed. Lyle could hear the soldiers pounding on the outer doors, their attempts to break through futile. They were running out of time. As the ship's thrusters fired and they began to drift away from the doomed vessel, Lyle took a moment to look at the woman. She was trembling, her face pale, but she seemed relieved to be away from the danger. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice shaky. "I thought I was going to die." Lyle nodded, though his mind was still racing. They had escaped, but the danger wasn't over yet. The soldiers would not stop until they had what they wanted, and that meant they had to be prepared for more trouble. The woman looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude, but also a deep sadness. "They were sent by the Ellerin military," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm the last of my family, the last heir to the throne. They want me dead so they can take control of Elira." Lyle's heart dropped. Elira, the very place they were headed. The sisters, Elara and Selene, were the rightful heirs to the throne of Elira. This woman, this stranger, was somehow connected to the royal family. The situation was more complicated than Lyle had imagined. "I'm not sure what you mean," Lyle said carefully. "Elara and Selene. They're the heirs to the Ellerin throne. Are you saying you're connected to them?" The woman nodded slowly, her expression heavy with sorrow. "I am their cousin. My name is Rhea. I was hidden away after the war began. My family kept me safe, but they were killed. I was supposed to take the throne, but they want me gone." Lyle's mind spun as he processed the information. This was bigger than he had thought. The struggle for power on Elira was far from over, and it seemed the forces who had been after Rhea were part of a larger conspiracy, one that threatened not only her life but the future of the royal family. Before Lyle could ask more questions, the freighter jolted as it made a sudden turn, speeding away from the pirate ship they had just escaped. Joran's voice came over the intercom, strained but determined. "We're not out of the woods yet," he said. "There's a fleet of ships on our tail. We need to lose them." Lyle's heart sank. The soldiers weren't the only threat. They had just attracted the attention of even more enemies. The crew scrambled to adjust the ship's course, trying to outrun the pursuing ships. The atmosphere inside the freighter grew tense as everyone worked together to escape. "Hold on," Joran called out as the ship made another sharp turn. The freighter swerved through the void of space, narrowly dodging incoming fire from the fleet of ships behind them. Lyle glanced at the sisters. Elara and Selene were huddled together, their eyes wide with fear, but there was a new resolve in their faces. They weren't just running anymore, they were fighting for their future. As the ship continued its evasive maneuvers, Lyle knew they couldn't keep running forever. The soldiers, the pirates, and now this new fleet, they were all coming for them. But one thing was certain, he wasn't going to let anyone take them down. No matter what happened, they were going to make it to Elira. They were going to reclaim their home. With a deep breath, Lyle turned to the crew, his voice steady and filled with determination. "Get us through this. We're not giving up." And as the stars streaked past them, Lyle knew this was only the beginning. The real battle for Elira was about to begin, but he would stand by the sisters, by their side, no matter what it took.